No.
Would it be fair to say that you've been in hiding?
Yes.
Why?
When you realize that the people that you know and you're close to and love have been involved in something that has to do with kidnapping and people dying, you start to think, oh my gosh, are they going to come after me? Like, everything closes in, and you start to think about your own safety, and you start to think about what really happened, and could this really be true? I had all kinds of fears, what the media would say about me, if they would say it the way I want to say it, like I'm saying it now. I wasn't ready.
So why are you ready today?
Because I faced all the fears, and then I decided that the truth was more important than what I wanted. And I needed to do it for those that have passed on, that justice may be served. I think it's fair to Charles and JJ and Tammy and Tylee that someone is standing up for what happened to them. And I care. I do care for them. And I care for the families that are involved.
And is that your goal in talking today?
My goal is to speak to the things that have gone on, and also to speak to many that believe their story of some of the things we're going to talk about zombies, to being a part of the 144,000, to multiple probations. These things do need to be discussed to those that do follow those teachings. And so I have a lot of perspective on that.
Would it be fair to say you know Chad and Lori better than anybody?
Probably.
And you know their beliefs.
Yep.
You know their activities. You know more about this story probably than anybody else other than them.
Yeah, I think so.
You told me the other day on the phone that someone told you needed to get an attorney. And what was your response when they said, have you gotten an attorney?
Well, how I responded to you is why do I need an attorney if I'm telling the truth? God is on my side.
So let's go back a few years and talk about Chad Daybell.
Okay.
How did you meet Chad?
The first time I met him, he was at a conference or an event speaking about his last days, dreams and visions, and I just walked up to him and introduced myself to him.
Was that in Rexburg?
I think the first time I met him might have been at a camp up in Ogden, I think. Somewhere in that area.
In northern Utah?
Northern Utah.
Were you impressed by what he had said there at the conference? Is that why you wanted to talk to him, or was it just a casual, good job?
I wanted to meet him because I thought his dreams were interesting, and when I met him, I thought he was a really nice guy, and anytime I saw him was at an event.
At what point did you become closer than just seeing him at events or, hearing him speak?
So when Lori and him met, that's when I started to get to know a little bit more.
Tell me how you met Lori.
So I was teaching a class at church one evening, and she was there, and she introduced herself to me.
And what was that encounter like?
She was very excited to hear the things I was teaching, and so when I went out to the hallway, she came up to me and introduced herself, and she told me about a lot of personal experiences that she had that were spiritual in nature, and we just hit it off. So
from there, a friendship developed.
Yep.
And what was that relationship like?
Wow.
In the beginning,
yeah.
What was it like?
So we talked often about our experiences that we had spiritually, and we talked about some of our trials that we've overcome, and we talked a lot about the second coming as well, and how excited we are for the things that we've been studying and learning, and so just a lot of interest in that area. Mm-hmm. And we just talked about life and being a mom, and JJ being a handful, being autistic, and what that was like, and we just talked about our life.
Do you remember what year that was, Melanie, when you met her?
Yeah, that was 2018, about October.
October of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
So you saw JJ, you saw Tylee, you knew that
Absolutely.
She was raising the kids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And at what point did she meet Chad? Because you knew Chad and you knew Lori, but they were separate relationships.
Correct. So I met her first. Well, I met him, within years, but didn't know him super close or anything like that. So then I meet her, and then her and I decided that we're going to go to an event in St. George, and so we drove down together. And then he was selling his books and speaking, and so that's when they got to meet. So that was probably October, November, somewhere in that time frame of the same year.
2018. So did you introduce them?
I don't know if I did or she just went up to the table. I can't recall.
And was there anything unusual or magical or different about when they met?
So we were there for 2 or 3 days, and I think he was there for 2 days, and she talked to him a lot about his books, and so she asked a lot of questions, and she was very interested in what he thought, and she was interested in what she knew, and so they just started talking about these different beliefs that generally are not something you learn in church, and so they started to kind of develop that connection right there.
And were you kind of intergrained with all of it right there as they're talking about these things?
I am going in and out, and I'm not sure exactly all the things they're saying.
I see.
Yeah.
But it wasn't anything unusual. It would be if you found somebody at the church that had similar beliefs and you were talking about things, or was it a step further?
It was a step further. It was discussing the things that were not something you would talk at church. It was something that you would talk closely with not a lot of people listening.
Did you know that Chad had a wife and 5 kids in Rexburg? And did Lori know that?
Yes.
And was Tammy ever with Chad?
No.
She didn't come with him to the events?
No.
And did his children?
Not that I know of.
Okay. So where did their relationship go from there?
So, after spending much time talking those 2 days, we went back to Arizona, and he came down to Arizona when it was the next event, which was in November sometime. And so many people, so some of my friends, some of Lori's friends, and then Chad, all got to stay in her house. It was one of the larger houses she had, so she had plenty of room throughout her house. And so they spent some time talking, and he spent some time talking to us as well.
Everybody stayed in this house.
Right, that's right.
Chad, Lori, you. Was Charles there?
No, he went out of town.
He was out of town. Did you have much interaction with Charles?
A little bit.
And what was that like?
So when I did interact, it was just like the first time I came over, I believe we did a barbecue, and he was cooking barbecue. That seemed that something that he was good at, according to both of them. And there was swimming in the pool with the kids, and he seemed like just kind of a nice guy, just happy to see us, happy to meet us. I don't know. It was an enjoyable conversation. He was talking a little bit about his conversion to the church, and he seemed to be pretty excited about it.
How would you describe his and Lori's marriage?
There seemed to be some arguing often when I would see them together. So he was trying to do things to help her and please her, and she seemed like she was struggling to be happy by that. Like she seemed a little often frustrated with him. They had something going on that I didn't quite understand, but there seemed to be a lot of contention between the two of them.
Did you ever see him lose his temper or become irate or angry with Lori or the kids?
Nope.
Did you ever see her become upset or angry with Charles?
Like vocally, I could see her, being upset, and he was frustrated back. So he might have had a little bit of that stress in his voice when you argue. So I would say just that arguing kind of a upset voice,
Yeah. So he wasn't there at the house the day that you guys were all there for that conference.
Right.
The conference happens, and what happens from there with Chad and Lori?
They just spent time talking about things. They went on a walk together or jog in the morning together. I do recall that. All the things they talked about, it's like so personal. It's so hard to share with the world. You know what I mean?
So it was very personal details.
So, well, some of it, he was teaching us about some of his understandings about multiple lives and things of that nature. But at that point, he had already shared with her when they met in St. George that they had been married multiple times before. So that was established when they first met.
Chad told Lori when they first met that they had been married before?
Not in this, right now in this earth life, but in multiple earth lives.
In a previous life? Mm-hmm. And did Lori have an issue with that?
I know she seemed to understand that teaching already, that she had learned already through podcasts. So it wasn't something that was
Foreign.